Hello, listeners to the WholeHearted Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the WholeHearted Podcast, and today I'm very excited to invite my very good friend, Winifred Ling. So let me introduce Winifred first. She describes herself as a secret keeper and an esteem-builder. I really like that. She's a couples therapist, a relationship coach, and a positive psychology practitioner. She's passionate about helping individuals navigate conflict in their relationships and equipping them with tools and knowledge to build the relationships of their dreams. Hi Winnie, welcome to the WholeHearted Podcast.
Hi Coen, I'm so happy to be here today.
Very excited to be having you. Winnie, when we connected like a few months ago on a nature walk, it really felt like I was talking to a long lost friend. So today we typically start our podcast with some questions, right? So the first question I typically ask is, what does being wholehearted mean to you?
Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, the wholehearted to me would be to be truthful and also to be sincere, and then it comes directly from the heart as well. So wholehearted, where you are able to connect with the other person. I think you cannot be wholehearted on your own. So it is always in the context of relationship.
I really like that, right? It's like you cannot be wholehearted on your own, right? It's like in a vacuum, right? It's like in a world where you're shouting out loud, right? It's like, what does it mean to be wholehearted? But I think wholehearted really, I really like what you just said, right? It's like it's in connection with somebody else.
Yes.
It's in relationship.
So when you said that just now, I was just reminded of people who, there's a trend where women get married onto themselves. They say, I'm going to get married to myself, which I think is also the same concept here, right? You cannot be wholehearted with yourself. You can be wholehearted, but you can't be married to yourself, because then that's just individual. There's no partner. I wonder whether you've heard of that, but there's something else lah. Anyway.
Personally, I've never heard of that before, but I kind of look at it as kind of like a movement towards like self-love. I don't know. It's
Perhaps,
yeah, but that's interesting. Perhaps I subscribe to the belief that very often relating is the essence of life. It's like we want to make a lot of money, we want to have great careers, but what actually are we doing? We are relating to each other. We are relating to people. We are relating to our clients. As leaders, we are relating to our subordinates, our team members. It's all about in relations where life comes alive, for want of a better word.
Agree with you. Everything is about relationship. Even with, like you said, like subordinate, your teammates and everybody. Like even now, we are connecting with the audience as well.
Indeed. So by this definition, right, what are some of the barriers for people or obstacles for people living life more wholeheartedly?
Okay. I think that the barriers to living wholeheartedly would be the lack of trust and perhaps previous trauma in some ways where you have been misunderstood, and therefore you become afraid of actually showing who you truly are. And
that segues very nicely right into the deep topic today we're talking about. Really, it's about relationships, right? So you're a couples therapist. So tell us a little bit more about couple therapy and what are some of the misperceptions or myths that people may have around therapies. Like, oh, no therapy, like something must be wrong with us, right?
That's right.
Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you are asking me this question, because then more people will know and dispel the myth, right? Okay, so the first myth that people have is that couples therapy is meant for serious issues. So I've heard people say that, oh, I've got problem, but should I go and see a couples therapist? But my problem is not so serious, and therefore I don't know whether I should go and see one. And I get quite frustrated hearing that, because then I will give an analogy and say that you're not going to wait for your car to break down completely before you get to the mechanic, isn't it? And so the idea of like just seeking help when your relationship is in a very bad place costs you time and risk as well, because the longer or more prolonged the pain is in the relationship, the harder it is to repair. And so at the first sight of issues, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to go and see a couples therapist, But then when you have worked on it for a period of time, say 6 months to a year, you have read up, you have done your research, you have tried intervention, and you are still feeling stuck, then that's when the time you should be open to seeking help.
Very, very good. I think what you just shared is very, very important, because tying back to what you just said, right, it's like people you meet, right, they come from different places of past experiences, trauma and everything like that. And I think everybody gets into a relationship wanting the best.
Yeah.
And obviously when you're in a relationship, you're in love, right? It's like,
Yeah.
like everything's great, everything's beautiful. It's like
Yes.
suddenly you have these big dreams of how things would be. But then they don't realize is that in relationships, it's really a relationship between two people who are typically very different, coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, bring their own emotional past as well.
Correct. And I think that's the beauty of it as well, because it will be quite boring to be married to somebody who is exactly like yourself,
Yeah.
right? So there is a bit of that complementary. And I think when we are able to see the differences as an invitation for growth and deeper connection, that's when you will not be afraid of having conflict. So conflict is essentially differences that cannot be resolved, right? And I think different people deal with conflict in a way that can be conflict avoidant or confrontational. So that is the style of conflict that caused the problem rather than the conflict itself. Yeah, and I think that so in relationship, when couples adopt a more open-minded and growth mindset and become more curious about how they are different in their position, then they will be able to tolerate and also ask questions about each other's preferences.
Ooh, so much to unpack in that one sentence, right? So much to unpack. So first of all, right, conflict is unavoidable, but it's how we deal with the conflict, our attitudes towards the conflict, how we deal with it, right, that actually makes or break a relationship. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's correct.
That's so meta, right? That's very meta, because you're like taking a step back. It's not the conflict itself that brings people apart. It's the way they handle the conflict that brings
Yeah.
people apart.
And the way that they handle conflict is often influenced by their family of origin. You know, how they watch or observe the parents have conversation or deal with disagreement, right? Is it peaceful? Is it very escalated? Or is it very fiery? Is it very violent? You know, and therefore the perception of how conflict is, or the idea of what conflict is, will be shaped by our own experience.
I love it. But it's also maybe sometimes complex as well. The complex trauma come from seeing one parent being more avoidant, like not wanting to deal with conflict, another parent being more, vehement in trying to deal with the conflict. So what happens? You see one avoidant and one very, very, overly aggressive person
Yeah.
towards the conflict.
Yes, exactly. And I think that the issue here is really about emotional regulation. You know, and when you are not able to regulate the emotion, and that's where the problem lies. So the person who needs to keep confronting has issue in regulating or stopping oneself from continuing from like pursuing the other person, right? So you have a pursuer as well as a distancer. So the pursuer will keep wanting to confront and say, hey, we have a problem, let's talk about it. I can see that you're upset. And then you go on and on and on about it. So then there is a poor regulation in terms of managing that discomfort. And the other person who is running away has got poor regulation in terms of receiving that emotion from the partner. So the way they deal with it will be to move away or to step away and say that, okay, I don't want to talk about it. They run away.
The reason why I say that is also because, from my own experience, my father is the one who always wants to talk about it, and my mom is a minimizer. So my father is a maximizer, my mom is a minimizer. So it's like, my mom often tell me this Chinese saying, right, 大事化小，小事化无. It's kind of like, you take a big thing and you make it small. You take a small thing and you just don't think about it and just make it disappear. And so that's the kind of like mixed messaging that I received as a child growing up. It's like, how do I handle conflict? Do I actively pursue a solution, or do I just it's okay, it's nothing? And frankly speaking, this whole it's nothing is also a form of conflict avoidance, and it's also not healthy. It's not a healthy pattern.
Not at all. Conflict avoidance can be very detrimental as well, because there's only so much that you can hold in, right? And the problem comes about when you're no longer able to hold it in, and then you explode. And then your partner wouldn't know, why in the world are you so angry? Because all this time you have been so peaceful about it, agreeable and happy about things, you see. And I've seen this in a few of the couples in my cases. And it's really, really sad because the person who didn't know, the partner who has been kept in the dark about the other partner's true intention, was deeply, deeply betrayed. Feel deeply, deeply betrayed because the agreement or the understanding was that, okay, we are doing this together. You're not hiding. You're actually being open with me. And for me to find out maybe like a year or two later that you've been unhappy or you're doing this because of coercion, that is really a deep form of betrayal. And it's very sad and very, very painful to watch. And I can't help them most of the time.
Yeah, I think also avoidance is also a form of toxicity, if I may say, because avoiding something doesn't actually make it go away. You're, instead of taking more proactive steps towards coming to a common solution.
Yeah, and I think for people who are avoidant, then the principle that they are abiding by will be harmony, and harmony at all costs, which is not possible. You need to engage because you can favor harmony at the cost of connection. You see. You will actually disconnect, isn't it? So I cannot be telling you the truth because I don't want to hurt you. So that's when the disconnection, the emotional disconnection will happen.
I love it. So you are saying is that a lot of times harmony in itself is a great thing, right? It's like we all want peace, we all want harmony, right? Why not, right? But sometimes when we have harmony at all costs, right? At all cost, it becomes a form of fake harmony.
Yeah.
And it actually gets in a way of connection. So actually what we all want is connection, but we're actually using harmony as like a secondary proxy, a proxy reward, a consolation prize that we seek instead of the true connection that we want.
Exactly. And I think that it is, and most of the time people are not quite aware of that. It's not like something that I intentionally do it. It's driven subconsciously. And so in the couples therapy process, when we talk about it, then we can unpack and actually say that, what's the reason for you not speaking up? And sometimes some of my the individual that I see, they will lie also. And they lie because they want to avoid consequence or they want to avoid conflict, you see, not realizing that lying is number one betrayal of trust, right? Then when you lie, I can't trust you. So I think it's a lack of knowledge, and you're just using whatever coping mechanism that you have learned as a young person or as a child or as an adolescent or as a young person without questioning it, you see. So it's very important to question your own coping mechanism as well.
Wow. People's like you say that their past experiences, their trauma and everything like that, it causes us to carry around certain baggages, for want of a better metaphor, right? And sometimes these are often unseen, but there's nothing like running a business or getting into a marriage to bring out all these things, right? It's like, I think it's almost like a trigger, for invitation for all this to come out.
The other part will be having kids lah. Having kids will be the other part where there will be more opportunity, for the lack of a better word, where all these will surface, right? Because and the stake will be much higher also. I can maybe at that point say, maybe I cannot tolerate, I can't give in to you because it's also important to me. And that's when the fight or the conflict will escalate.
Okay, but isn't it, for example, if you cannot tolerate, right, isn't there a more like healthy way of expressing boundaries or expectations instead of just having a very, for want of a better word, a very uneducated way or unelegant way of just going about it?
I mean, that's why I do my work as well, right? And that's why I also wish for more young people to build their capacity and skills in romantic competence, which is about like how to address issues calmly. You can address issues without raising your voice. It can be very peaceful. I can be arguing with you or disagreeing with you in a way that is not escalated. And I think a lot of people don't know how that look like. They have not seen that being modeled, and therefore they are not quite sure that is possible to be done, you see. Wow.
Coming back to something you mentioned earlier on, right? So you say that when conflict happens, right, they don't actually recognize conflict as an invitation to connect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just playing around with that hypothesis right now. Could conflict be an invitation to connect?
Of course, for sure.
Tell me more.
You know, like how it can help you to connect would be it allows you to find out about your partner, right? I mean, like, let's say if you hold on to a position very, very tightly, then I want to know what is the reason for that. So in the Gottman intervention, there is one particular one where they talk about dream within the conflict. The dream is within the conflict. So we want to uncover what are the dreams between the conflict itself. So then I can say that, oh, you know, I need things to be done in a particular way because that made me feel safe. You know, and therefore I need to be firm about this and I cannot agree and compromise with you. So that would be the underlying, you see. But a lot of time the fight happens on the surface rather than what is really hidden beneath. And therefore, when you adopt a more open-minded and curiosity, right? Then you say that, okay, when we have conflict, actually, we are being invited to learn even more about each other.
Ooh, love it.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that would be so beautiful. I wish for more people to know about that as well. I mean, I didn't know that myself because my initial years with my husband was also pretty tough. And that's actually what it led me to, you know. It was my own relationship that led me to become a couples therapist.
I love it. I mean, the idea that, just a parallel idea, right? It's like in negotiation in business, right? Negotiation starts the moment someone says no. Why? Because you're starting to draw the line. Like, you know where each other stand. And then that's how we actually negotiate, right? We actually create the grounds in between which we can negotiate. And very often we don't realize that. And the same thing too is like, you could almost say that a conflict is an invitation to connect. It's the moment in time through conflicts you get to learn about each other's preferences. I like the way you use the word preferences. I love it. It's actually all just preferences. You learn about each other's preferences. You learn about each other's expectations. You learn about each other's values. I think
that's right. Absolutely. You know, you put it really beautifully, Coen.
Yeah. So like for example, right, if you actually lean in to learn, right, you're gonna grow so much in the relationship, isn't it?
Yes, and that's the beauty of it. And that's what I hope for most couples to realize. And continuing that journey with openness and excitement, right? And say that, hey, actually, let me find out what I don't know about you. What are the areas that we are actually not in agreement, and find out why, and then we can really deepen that connection.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But let me just let me just go all the way down and ask this question. Okay. Has there been times when after working with you, couples decided the best options, they come to this realization that the best option is still to divorce?
Of course. So many. Actually, that will be more the case than not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think with one success, I may have like 3 or 4 who decide not to continue with the marriage, you see. Yeah, so it requires quite a steel heart to be in this job and to have a lot of hope, because I actually experience more failure than actually success in terms of therapy.
So would that still be considered a success? Or is it considered like, oh, you failed at helping them to reconcile? In
terms of the outcome, then of course I can't help them. But have I failed as a therapist? I like to think that no, because then I have helped them I have provided the clarity for them to understand why you cannot continue, you see. Because in order to continue, either one of you or both of you will need to compromise to really learn new skills. And not everybody is ready to do that, you see. And more often than not, the point in time when they seek help is actually too late. And therefore, it makes it really hard for the therapist to do any meaningful work.
I kind of look at it as for example, right, if without coming to a therapist, they decided to end it anyway, it may end in a very acrimonious kind of way, in a way that, you know, they became enemies. Yeah.
So this link it back to the other myth that I want to address as well. Like, a lot of people think that seeing the couples therapist is what the stop before going to the divorce lawyer. And I would say that if that is the perception, then don't bother coming to see the couples therapist, because you've already decided you are already not valuing your relationship because you see that as a last-ditch attempt, you see. So I've heard it so many times. Oh, we are seeing you because it's the last-ditch attempt at our marriage before we want to get a divorce. And I will always be like, also that's how much your marriage is of value to you, you see. If not, you will invest in it more, right? You will come and seek help earlier on.
Love it.
Yeah. But then I think it is that understanding of like the idea of like needing to invest in the relationship is probably still lacking. You know, you just assume that the marriage will unfold on its own without much effort. You know, so I think that is the mistaken belief. You reap what you sow.
Yeah. But so the thing is, even after the intervention, they still decide to go separate ways. But at least they make such a decision in a more empowered way, from a more empowered space.
Yes, and oftentimes in this kind of situation, then I will also be helping them in the process for like evaluating the pros and cons of staying or leaving, you know, and whether and helping them to assess whether they have the capacity to even repair, because it requires work. And it's actually not a walk in the park. It's really difficult to be in therapy because you need to confront issues. And if you have been avoiding issues all these years, why would you want to confront it? Right? And therefore, the hard job is actually creating that safe space for them to be able to speak their truth and be wholehearted with each other. But unfortunately, at times, it's too late.
What do you think about relationship as the best source of healing? I personally believe that relationships is one of the best sources of healing.
It definitely has a potential in it. You know, and I actually am curious to hear your experience of that, and then maybe I can add on also. Like you must have experienced something that allow you to make that statement, isn't it?
Well, I have done a lot of reading as well. I mean, I've done a lot of healing work myself, and read a lot of books around relationships as well. I've also read a book which is quite controversial idea that we often are attracted to people who play into our trauma. And for myself, right, I've often seen myself as wanting to be a savior to my mom. And unconsciously, I didn't realize that I took a lot of this into my adult relationships, into my romantic relationships, where I am attracted to people that I feel like I can save them. I can be for them what they need me to be. And so I was actually playing into a very complex kind of hero complex. So, and that has actually it's actually been very, very detrimental to all my past relationships. And when I saw that, right, I needed to go and heal that. And even as I go through life, right, as a coach, I still see people very often who may need some form of healing. And then I get very attracted to people like that. I mean, not just necessarily romantically attracted, but also very, as a coach, right? Yeah. So it took a lot of inner work for me to realize that actually all of these are just projections of my desire to be a rescuer for my mom. So that's one of my personal experiences. And once I saw that, it actually transformed my relationships with my partner, with my wife. It also transformed the way I relate in general to people. Yeah, that's one example.
Sure, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, definitely there is a potential. The healing potential in marriage is tremendous if we are open to it and if we allow ourselves to really experience the process. You know, and I think that I can share my own experience in terms of being codependent as well. You know, like being codependent, needing to be needed, wanting to help, you know, really wanting to rescue, which is also a trauma reaction from my own upbringing too. And I had one relationship where I couldn't even draw a boundary. And it was a very young relationship. I was only 16 at that time. But then I got into a relationship with someone who was 3 years older, and I was under the illusion that, you know, no matter what you do, I'll forgive you because I love you so much. You know, there was completely no boundary. And eventually I found out much later that he cheated on me. And I think that was the first case of like, oh, so you cannot just be trusting people blindly, right? Or just be the good person or be the biggest hearted person in the relationship. So that was a really painful experience that I learned on my own. And so moving forward, in my current relationship, I have learned to also receive rather than just to give, because my tendency is actually to give. Right, to be the one that offer and to be the one to save, but I quite intentionally wanted somebody where I can feel safe in receiving.
Oh my God, what you just said just really, really resonated with me, because I also have difficulty receiving. So sometimes the difficulty in receiving, right, also comes from even when the love is given, I just don't have that radar antenna to receive. It's almost like it doesn't seep in, it doesn't go into me, and that plays into my own defective trauma, like feeling not good enough and everything like that. So I always feel like I have a lot of worthiness issue, like I'm not good enough. And so when I receive it, right, I still feel like, well, I can't be receiving this. This is too good to be true. I don't deserve this at all.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. I that's exactly the narrative that I had for a long time as well. And so I think the earlier days of my relationship, I often wonder when my then boyfriend, not married yet, right? Then boyfriend would leave me and say, let me just push. Is he going, maybe at some point he's going to leave me because he just cannot accept me, So there was an issue of self-acceptance for myself first, right? That I projected on him and say, oh, I'm just going to keep poking you until you will leave me. And then I say, see, I'm not deserving of this.
My goodness, I don't know whether you're telling my story or what. That's exactly my story, right? Then I reinforce this whole abandonment issue. It's like, then it's like, of course they would leave, right? Because I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to be alone again. But I live in a relationship with this constant fear of being abandoned. And then, like you said, you push it, you kind of test it, subtly test it. And that's so tiring for yourself, for the other person. And you're not present to the relationship. You're not present to what a beautiful gift that relationship is. What a beautiful gift. Two separate human beings coming together in a relationship.
And there will always be anxiety, right? Underlying anxiety, which is very unhealthy for your own well-being and for the relationship as well. So it's like, it's all in your head. Sometimes it's true, I didn't realize it. I was like, I'll be wondering and then questioning or be finding fault.
Oh my goodness, like myself, right? It's like after somebody has left, right? I end up going into another relationship again. And the other relationship this time will be with somebody who's not very needy. But this time I go in a relationship with somebody who's very distant. So they are more withholding type. So that again plays into my whole narrative that I don't deserve love, right? Then I find myself wanting more and more and more, and I become the needy one. And then eventually they will leave again. So I think that's why I said once we heal ourselves, right, then we change the way we show up in a relationship. It changes the entire dynamic.
Yes, that's right. So I think that I dislike the statement that, oh, you complete me. The Jerry Maguire show. Oh, you complete me. I found the love of my life. I was incomplete till I find you. It's very, very romantic. But I think you are pushing too much responsibility to the other person to fulfill your happiness, you see. That the motto that I would want to encourage people to adopt will be, you make me want to be a better person. Being with you inspire me to be good, to be better, to be the best version of myself. So then we are already whole, and then when we come together, it's two whole person coming rather than two halves, two incomplete person coming together.
Yes, exactly. Relationship is not about merging. It's not about a symbiosis. I mean, psychological term is symbiosis. Symbiosis is two separate people, two separate halves, somehow coming together in this world because of fate or whatever, and somehow you complete me, I complete you. It's like, we merge together as one. No, you don't merge together as one. You are two separate human beings having a relationship with each other. My mentor said this very well. Very often people come to say, hey, my relationship has turned sour. Oh, our relationship is no longer the same. Stop blaming the relationship. Look at how you're relating. It's a verb, not a noun. Right? It's like the relationship has changed. it's because the way you are relating has changed. It's not the relationship has changed. The relationship is just a status.
That's a very good point. Yes, it's a verb. Like if the relationship has changed, it's not a bad thing either. It should actually evolve. If you expect your relationship to remain the same, then there is no growth, is there?
That's right. Talking about evolve and growth, right? It's like I also read another book which says something about asking your partner for change, right? Myself, I can't speak for you, but I can speak for myself, right? Being a trainer, being in a personal development space, I'm always embracing a growth mindset, right? So I always think of how can I be better, right? Like you said, right? How can I be a better human being? How can I be inspired to be a better version of myself, right? But sometimes also I find myself imposing that idea on my partner, like, hey, you also want to be better, right? You want to grow as well. So sometimes I can't help but point out her blind spots and say, hey, these are some of your blind spots. Hey, these are some areas in which you can grow. What do you think about that? It's like some people are kind of like, hey, if you love me, you should take me for who am I, right? It's like, why do you need to ask me to grow? Why do you ask me to change?
Yeah, very, very good question. I would say that the change has to be initiated by the person, individual, himself or herself. I mean, we can identify or say that, hey, maybe this is an area that I am seeing that I'd like you to be better, but who are we to judge them also, right? I mean, we can say that we can, I think when you fixate on the problems, that you can't quite love the person also. So when you judge, you can't love.
Aww.
And I think that the first step, maybe in intimate relationship, acceptance is more important than I want you to be a better version of yourself, because then I'm already judging you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it can be an invitation and say that, I have benefited from this program, and I would love for you to enjoy it as well, because I can see the potential in it. But it's completely up to you whether you want to take it up or not, because I love you as you are.
Oh.
So it's the way you phrase it as well. It's the phrasing, the invitation, rather than, you are really bad at this. Please go and upgrade and do this. So it's very different feel. It's also the way how we communicate it. And I also know that some couples, they will do a yearly evaluation of areas where they can improve on and things like that. So I've met people like that, where they do a assessment and then they plan for next year goal, what can we work on. I mean, pretty nice.
Almost like a performance appraisal for husband.
Yeah.
Job description.
Not just
husband.
For wife,
performance appraisal. Wife, performance appraisal.
Yeah. I mean, it is a good way to check in, if you want to do it, you can also do that with a therapist, right? Relationship coach, where you can have a space where both of you talk about it, and then the therapist will guide that process for you also, or offer additional insight. So those kind of conversation is actually quite healthy, because you care so much about it that you want to find out where are the areas where you have done well, and where are the areas that you think that you can do better for the sake of the family. So this can be in terms of the romance, the couple relationship, or as a parent, or as a family.
I love that. I think that's so important as well, right? It's like I was reading, I think was it on LinkedIn, somebody was asking, like, we often give grades to children at school, right? It's like, but what if you ask your children to grade you as a parent? It's almost like we have 360 degree feedback in the corporate world, right?
Yeah.
But do we have 360 feedback at home?
I do that, I actually asked my daughter to grade me, and there was a period of time 2 years ago where I was really occupied with my study and my work, where she has given me C before.
Aww.
And I mean, it was quite a hard time for her as well, because we have always been very, very close. And then during that year, I didn't even realize that I have neglected her so much. And she has the capacity to recognize it and to express it to me, to which I'm really, really grateful. And so from then on, I will periodically kind of like check in and say, so what grade will you give to Mama this time around? And then she will say A-, maybe B+, or A+.
Aww.
So we are in a really good place right now. So I've been getting my A's from my daughter.
That's so awesome. Yeah, that's a very, very good system, right, of checking in.
Yeah.
I really, really like it. I think coming back to the whole thing about asking to change, right? It's like I read a book where it says something like, when you're asking people to change, when you're asking your partner to change, is it coming from love or is it coming from fear?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right? It's like, for example, if I'm coming from fear, right? It's like I'm saying, hey, you need to, be more romantic. You need to be more empathetic to my feelings. You need to be more this, you need to be more that. But what you're actually saying is that I need you to be in a certain way so that you can assuage some of my fears. It will make me feel better if you do this. But that one is still very selfish. But if it's love, it's coming from love, right? It's like saying, hey dear, it's like I see you're struggling with this, and this can help you become better, right? It's like it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of, hey, I genuinely want you to be better.
Yeah. And I think here when we say that I want it to be better for you, there is also a bit of a superiority lah. How would you know that?
That's so true.
Well, how would you know that this will be better for me? So you're actually questioning the person's assessment of himself. I say you're quite presumptuous in saying that you think that you know better, or you know what is better for me, you see. And I think I learned this the hard way as well, right? Because me trained as a therapist, in the earlier years of my marriage, I was a bit more like, you got to tell my husband, you got to be doing this, you're this, you're that, you're this. But to his credit, and I really appreciate it, he didn't give in to my criticism. He was like, no, I don't want to do it. And I think that was how I learned to also respect him, meaning like he has a very strong core as well. It's not someone who just, okay, yes dear, I'll do it, but he actually said that, no, I think you are the one who has an issue, go and reflect on it yourself. I'm like, ouch.
Whoa. conflict.
Yeah. So my husband is a very direct person too, and I learned the value of being forthright and direct too. Actually, I used to be a bit more tactful, a bit here and there, but in recent time, I have learned to also be more forthright, because I think the whole thing is being forthright doesn't mean that you're rude, but you say as it is, with kindness and gentleness if possible.
That's so beautiful. There's so much that we are unpacking over here, right? It's like the whole idea about asking people to change really is like, really is it about you? Sometimes it's our fear talking, right? So it's so important for us to reflect on ourselves as well.
Yeah. The fear talking, or the presumption that we know better, and then when you presume, then you are judging also.
Yeah.
And I think no one will appreciate that, even if it is the best out of the best concern or intention, right?
That reminds me of the whole transaction analysis thing, right? It's like, are you relating to people as adult relationship, or are you relating to people as a parent-child relationship? Anytime when you're prescriptive, or you're saying, hey, you need to do this better because it's good for you, I only want it best for you, it's almost like you're treating your partner as your child, right? Yeah. You're talking to them like a child, and it doesn't invite agency from them. It doesn't inspire them to want to change.
Exactly, that's right. The agency has to come from the individual, the free will, right? The free will to decide. And sometimes you can always influence. You don't have to say must do this, but say, hey, this is beneficial to me. Are you open to trying it out? You can always invite.
It's such a constant reminder for myself as well, as I'm embarking on this journey of becoming a more trauma-informed human being, and also a more trauma-informed leader. I still sometimes feel like when I talk to my team also, sometimes I tend to be a little bit more prescriptive, coming from a little bit more of a high ground, like, I know better than you. And I kind of recognize that. I'm not blaming anyone, but I kind of recognize that as like the voice of my dad talking. Like, my dad often tells me, like, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to be better, you need to be better. And I remember I used to really rebel against that. Yeah. It's like I tend to want to do the exact opposite of what you tell me to do, right? It's like, and we often realize that human beings, we don't realize that, when we tell people something, telling is not influencing. Telling is not communication. Because it's one way, it's top down.
Yeah. And the better way to do it would really be sharing stories, I think. So stories are a really powerful way of like sending message rather than, and usually when you tell the story, then it's up to the individual to unpack and pick up whatever that they want to hear and receive. And that works for children, it works with husband, it works with your leaders or your bosses or the people that you work with also.
As a person who coaches leaders of storytelling, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Right, and of course, right, talking about
stories. I'm preaching to the choir.
And also talking about stories, right, is a perfect segue, right, to talk about your personal story, right? Like, how did you end up? How did you get into doing couples work in the first place?
Okay, so the first year of my marriage was really challenging. And we went through 4 years of courtship, and it was pretty smooth sailing. And also we overcome really difficult challenges because I'm a stroke patient. I had a rare disease called Moyamoya disease. And so the year when I met my husband was the year that I fell sick. So he actually has been through the whole process with me from the first time maybe not the first time that I was admitted, but probably the second time that I was admitted, actually it's the first time that I admitted, all the way till now, you see. So I would say that his loyalty and commitment to remain to be with me is something that I really, really value and appreciate. Yeah, so that's the illness bit. And then after that, we got married and went to the US. So I expected our life in the US to be honeymoon, right? Because we went through so much adversity together. We've proven our commitment. So it should be happily ever after, lah, right? But then it was the opposite. The first year overseas was so difficult. And I think I was struggling with the transition. I was struggling with my identity. I was recuperating from my stroke and illness. And so our fights escalated. And I also started to pick on him a little bit more because I had no one else. It was just the two of us in a foreign land in Bay Area of California. I lost my social support, and so, but these are all hindsight. I didn't even realize it at that point in time. So I was on high anxiety, and I was feeling very insecure. And whenever he went to work, then I'm left by myself and I have to figure out what to do with my life. So I felt really, really anchorless for that few years. It took me 3 years to actually find myself and what I want to do in my life. And in that period, I started going for conferences. And because of my own challenges in marriage, then I started reading up on books around relationship. And then I decided that, hey, actually this is something that I can possibly do. And I will walk the talk, right? I know how it feels like to be in a conflict situation, to be let down, to be hurt. So I decided that I think I can be good at this. And then that's what I wanted to do. And then I went for my training with the Government Institute.
Wow, thanks for sharing your story. I think one part I want to unpack here is when you got married and then you moved to the Bay Area. Tell me about the challenges of being a trailing spouse, having your social support. I mean, so your friends are here, your family and friends are all here in Singapore, right? It's like, how does it feel like to suddenly be so dislocated from all these people?
Very, very difficult. I mean, the word is really alienated. I was so alienated. Not just that, right? It's a huge displacement because everybody has their life in order and I wasn't working and my visa didn't allow me to work. People may think that, you can go and study, but I didn't want to jump into something else without really knowing what is it that I really wanted to do. So I didn't go on that path. So I was just really struggling with my self-worth and identity, and being raised in an environment where there's always a measurement and benchmark. It was really hard for me. And I've always been a high achiever. Then I can say, okay, you get this, you get A's, then you get performance grade A or whatever. And now there's nothing, So for a while, I was like, how am I measuring my worth? I'm just sitting around at home watching TV serials or cooking and going for my walk. How do you measure success? So it was a period of self-discovery, very, very difficult for quite a high achieving person like myself. So that's one part of it, the loneliness and the sense of disconnection. And at the same time, my peers back home, they are progressing. They're becoming like senior psychologists, maybe principal psychologists, whereas I'm like a nobody, right? Even at 40, I was like, actually looking at my bank account, I feel quite embarrassed because there's nothing much there as I was not really working. So it's quite a big hit to my sense of worth and identity. So that's part one of it. The part two of it is because of my stroke, I have hidden disabilities. I can't see on my right visual. So when I was at moving around was difficult. So sometimes when I would bump into people or in the car, There's one time at a parking lot, I opened the car door and then the car door hit another car, and the driver was very mad and walked over and then scolded me and said, why are you being rude by slamming the door? But the truth of the matter is I didn't even see his car next to me. I mean, people may say that it's a huge car, why can't you see it? But that's what it is, right? I lost my right visual field, and I often get lost as well. You know, going to new places, I get lost more often than not. So it was quite challenging, and it also impacted my self-esteem.
Tell me more about this Moyamoya disease.
So Moyamoya disease is a condition where there is a narrowing of the blood vessels. So that's one part of it. Yeah, so then in my case, it was the narrowing of the blood vessel, and therefore I run the risk of having stroke. And I actually had many TIAs. TIAs are transient ischemic attacks. So these are minor mini strokes where you recover from it. So I may run and then I get numbness in my hand, but then after that, after half an hour, I can recover. But it was a very scary thing because you never know when is the one that will be permanent, you see. So I had numerous of that for at least 3 years before I decided to go for a brain surgery. So I had not just a brain surgery, I actually had 2 brain surgeries. And it was after the second brain surgery that I had this massive stroke that impacted my right visual field as well as my ability to read and write. So I couldn't really read because all the pages were cut into half. You know, so initially I was like, oh, what happened? You know, because usually you don't track, so you can just see it, right? Then everything that I read was cut into half. I couldn't even pick up my phone, you know, and those days is not the smartphone. So I was not able to use the phone, and I couldn't really remember a lot of information. So the first 2 weeks after that stroke was really, really challenging. I had no idea what I was becoming. Yeah, so that was quite a dark period of my life.
Sorry to hear that. And thanks for sharing that. That.
It's actually not something that I have also shared I have not really shared this openly with many people. So while people do know that I had this condition, I went for brain surgery and I had some challenges. But the extent of the difficulties were not something that I felt comfortable in sharing, and I didn't really want people to pity or, you know, say the wrong thing that trigger me further. You know, like, oh, it's okay, gonna be alright. You know, I have people telling me that before my surgery, which really upset me, but I couldn't say anything because I knew that it came from a place of good intention, you know. But how would you know whether the surgery will be okay? You're not the one that's going through it. Even the surgeon will not tell me they'll be okay. There'll always be some risk involved.
I think people just meant well. It's just but probably when you share this, when you broke the news to them, they're also processing their own grief, their
Correct.
own sadness.
I know that, which is why it stopped me from sharing. So going back to your earlier question on barriers being wholehearted, right? So this will be it as well, because people cannot really understand. They can't really sit through that space. They can't really hold the space efficiently or properly, and therefore then I will not want to impose it on anybody.
What you just brought up a very, very important point to discuss actually. I think the world that we live in today is all talking about vulnerability, where it's like, oh, we invite people to be vulnerable. We tell people to be vulnerable on social media, tell your stories on Instagram, on LinkedIn, right? But I think we are missing the whole point altogether. We cannot ask for vulnerability without, first of all, building safety, secondly, building capacity, and thirdly, building trust, right? It's like, we ask people to be vulnerable, but when people are being vulnerable, maybe because they are not well trained how to be vulnerable properly, the vulnerability spills out as emotional flooding, and then as a recipient of it, and you do not know how to kind of like process it, or you kind of just kind of say, no, it's okay, don't think too much about it, it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right. And now that actually is very triggering and very, very it actually can re-traumatize people. right? Because this such a response will make people say, hey, you're inviting my vulnerability, and when I'm being vulnerable, you're not meeting where I am.
Correct. Yes. Yes. And I know that I don't really have expectation of that as well, and I think that it is really not hard. But I'm a trained person, and I even then sometimes when I have to hold space for my friends, it is not easy to hear how hard the other person is going through life, right? And so you would want to say something to comfort the person, but actually the best comfort is just to be quiet and listen attentively, or you can validate the emotion, but then offering advice or any platitude would be the last thing that you want to do.
Yeah. I think it also just goes back to people wanting to be the best, or they want to serve you in some ways, and they're trying to look for solutions. But sometimes people just need to be joined and be able to have someone listen and hear them, and to be able to empathize and feel for them, holding space, as you correctly say, rather than going into solutioning.
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes the rush to solutioning is our own function of us wanting to not stay in our discomfort and wanting to just get into a solution state.
Correct.
But that itself, the rush to solution, can be very shaming for people. What is the unconscious message you're sending is who you are today, your current state right now is not okay. Let's make it okay.
That's right.
But people may not be ready to be okay, or maybe at their current situation they just can't be okay. So there's no point trying to convince them otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Wow. There's no wonder that all your life experiences have imbue you with this deep empathy and this ability to really listen beyond what people say or don't say, but really to understand their heart's promptings and their heart desires.
I do think that it plays a part. It really helps me to be a better therapist, better listener, and really feel with the other person, because it's actually really hard to expose yourself to the heartbreak, right? The journey in, let's say, in couples relationship. And I often say that when you are doing better, I rejoice with you, and when you have setbacks, I actually feel sad with you also. So you are constantly going through the emotional roller coaster. But of course, with training, I learned how to also distance and making sure that I care for my own well-being also. So, that's part of the training. But while I'm in it, I'm actually really going through the up and down. And I think that what sets me apart perhaps will be that ability to really empathize.
I can feel that. That empathy. That's awesome. You speak very eloquently about your knowledge and your tools that you've learned, you've picked up. But I think at the end of the day, it's about yourself, right? What do you bring? You bring your empathy, you bring your presence. That's why you describe yourself as like a secret keeper and esteem builder.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's so beautiful. It speaks really right to my heart. So, what's next for you, Winnie? What are you most excited and passionate about in this season of your life?
I'm really excited about this book project that I have been involved in for the last 5 years, and it's going to be launching really, really soon, sometimes in mid-November. So it's a book. The title of the book project is Rising Above, and it's a collection of stories, 23 stories to be specific, where the contributors share about their journey in overcoming adversities, as well as how they find meaning in their suffering, and also how the tools that have helped them to overcome and living a flourishing life.
That's great. So we'll put a link to the book in the show notes below.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Winnie, as we come towards the end of this interview, which has been, it's just flown by, right? It's like
yeah, that's right.
We're going to have some quick fire questions to end. So just answer in short, 1 to 2 sentence, quick fire questions. Are you ready for the quick fire questions?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. First question. What's the most powerful question you have been asked before?
Tell me more. Oh, that's a statement, not a question.
No, wait, but that's a great invitation, right? Tell me more.
Tell me more.
It's a beautiful, beautiful invitation. Who is a mentor or supporter who has made the biggest difference in your life?
Irvin Yalom, although I'm not like directly, I read his book and I really liked him, and I think my therapy approach is influenced by him. Professor Irvin Yalom.
Irvin Yalom, man, where is he from?
He should be in Stanford right now, but he's a renowned psychiatrist that turned into psychotherapist, and he has written many books for about therapy and how therapy should work. So I really admire him and the way he writes, the way he relate with his clients, and it's more around existentials, which really resonate with me also.
Beautiful. Final question. What is one of the most courageous things you have done in your life that's made all the difference?
Going for the surgery would be the most courageous thing. After that would be getting married.
You going for the surgery, wow.
Yeah, going for the surgery was quite frightening because I was only 31 at that time, but then I think that you have you're not sure what will happen, right? It could be paralyzed, but I think I'm very thankful to my younger self for having that courage to just go with it.
You're a very courageous person.
Thank you.
So Winnie, if our guests or our listeners would like to find out more about you, where can they find out more about you? Where can they go?
They can find me on LinkedIn, where I contribute and share my thoughts. They can also find me at Promises Health. Promises Health.
Yeah. Yep, we'll put the link to your website as well as your LinkedIn bio in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you once again, Winnie. It's such a wholehearted conversation with you. Thank you so much for inspiring us, especially something that's so relatable, something that's so important in the world today. Really helping couples, to deal better with conflict, build better relationships, because it's in these relationships that we truly, truly thrive and flourish.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Bye.